Welcome to Flashpoint, everybody. I'm Jason Colthorpe. Good discussions this week, starting with the hundreds of millions of dollars in grants that were suddenly cut last week in the House. Bridge, Michigan reporter Jordyn Hermani is here to talk about it. Mark Hollis is going to join us to talk about his plans for next summer's Rocket Classic Golf Tournament. And Gary Miles of the Detroit News is here as the milestone agreement between Detroit's two newspapers is about to end. Well, let's get after it right now on Flashpoint. In the Michigan House last week, the GOP-led Appropriations Committee slashed $645 million in state spending without the Senate's approval. Now, after the shock and awe wore off this week, the Senate followed up by voting to reinstate all of that money. But House Speaker Matt Hall, who has led the charge against reining in COVID-era spending, might not be willing to vote to fully restore those funds, at least not right now. But as it stands, those cuts would hit a lot of nonprofits and organizations that have already put the promise of that money into action. Among those cuts, grants for the Holocaust Memorial Center, the Detroit Zoo, the Motown Museum, school zone traffic cameras, and symphony orchestras, just to name a few. The biggest hit, $159 million taken from the Make It in Michigan Competitiveness Fund, a program for infrastructure, climate, and economic development. Another major cut, $18.5 million for RX Kids, a program supporting pregnant women and new moms. Now, Democrats say these are not luxuries. These are lifelines for people to survive. Well, let's dive into it a little further right now on Flashpoint. Here to discuss all of that is Bridge, Michigan political reporter Jordyn Hermani. Great to see you.
Thanks for having me.
Why don't we start at the beginning of all of this exactly? Because a lot of folks, I don't know if they know exactly how these cuts came about, because it wasn't like the normal route that we see.
No, not at all. So the House Appropriations Committee, which the House is currently being led by Republicans, the Senate being led by Democrats, the House Appropriations Committee voted unilaterally, used a little known piece of state law, which basically gives an Appropriations Committee in either the House or the Senate final say on some of these work projects. Now, these work projects are state grant dollars that are given to organizations or even state departments to give to organizations to enact certain things. So, you know, some of these cuts that we saw the other week, one was for RX Kids. It's a first in the nation cash program for new and expecting mothers. That saw an $18.5 million cut. One of those programs, another one was a wigs prosthetics program in Michigan. We don't cover that. Wigs for kids. Yeah. We don't cover wigs under insurance for children going through cancer treatment or for anyone really. They saw an over $50,000 cut, excuse me. And basically what that means is that for the end of the fiscal year, now this was money they got back in the 2024-25 budget cycle, House Republicans basically said if you haven't used it at this point, you're going to lose it. And that took a lot of people, including those grant recipients, by surprise.
And when we talk about if you haven't used it, now this is an interesting part of the process, because a lot of people don't realize, like say you're the Detroit Zoo, which had $7 million, for example, haven't allocated any of that money to them, but maybe they've taken out a loan or started spending their own money to build something, to start with whatever you plan to use with that money. And now this feels a lot like, for these groups, that rug gets yanked out from under them in the middle of it.
Well, and so case in point, I spoke with the folks from Maggie's Wigs for Kids, or they put out a statement, excuse me, basically saying that it takes time. They are burdened by supply chain issues, they're burdened by tariff-related issues, and so these wigs aren't instantaneous. It's not you purchase it, here's the money, and then it disappears from a bank account. They have to wait for these things to come in, and so they've explained to the Senate Appropriations Committee, which had a hearing earlier this week to let people kind of air their grievances on the matter, explained to them, like, we have made these purchases, but now we don't have the funds to complete that. Now, the Republican rebuttal to that is, well, there are funds coming, you know, Maggie's Wigs for Kids being one of them, RX Kids being another, that in this current budget cycle, the 25-26 fiscal year, they're getting more money coming to them. So their argument is nothing should really be stopped or stalled, whereas these groups are now saying, But this money was tied to contracts. This money was tied to things that are currently in motion. And so not having that money will set things back for these groups, some of whom say it puts plans to expand in limbo.
Right. They are expecting to get this money on the back end, and if it's not there, this could be devastating. Now, I want to talk about what the Senate did, but first, Speaker Matt Hall has talked about got to rein in the COVID spending, but he also talks about finding waste, fraud, and abuse. Has anything that you've seen amongst these grants really qualify as what would be considered waste, fraud, and abuse?
Well, I think what's interesting about that term is it seems largely subjective. One man's waste and abuse is another person's necessity. Insofar as fraud, I've not necessarily seen anything that rises to that level yet. But case in point, though, everyone, including the departments who are responsible for administering these grants, we're all still trying to wrap our heads around exactly how broad and how deep these cuts are, because the fiscal documents that we were operating off of that were handed out to us, those were for the full grant dollar amount. So it totaled somewhere near $645 million worth of cuts. Yeah. Some of those programs, though, we've heard have already spent all of those dollars, or were 95% of the way into spending those dollars. So the idea of actually seeing $645 million worth of cuts, we don't know if it's quite at that level yet. House Speaker Matt Hall said 644 the other day, but we're still trying to figure that out, even still.
And I've seen, a lot of as going down the list, some have gotten their full allocation back, or a lot of it, or enough of it. Mm-hmm. So I think there's a lot of that up in the air. So the Senate, on the heels of those cuts last week, this week, comes together and votes to restore this money, which of course now it's got to go back to the House where it was cut in the first place. But I thought it was interesting, and correct me if you agree, that 5 Republican senators also kind of broke ranks to join on this, because when it comes to actually voting on this, that might change some outlooks.
Yeah, no, and case in point, 2 of the Republicans who did vote in favor of restoring those funds have also been vocal about the fact that they felt that this situation, or how it came to be, was poorly handled. One of them, Senator John DeMoose, he's a Republican, he said outright that, does this not set a precedent? You know, if the argument is, well, the groups didn't use all this funding, they should have to make their case as to why they need it back. His question, which is a valid one, it's one I've had myself, is, does this not create a sort of situation where you're now incentivizing groups to spend down, in some cases, millions and millions of dollars in very short time periods? So, for instance, RX Kids had told me, their CEO, or their head, Dr. Mona Hanna, had told me that basically some of the contracts that they were expecting to pull through didn't even really materialize until the last couple of months. So were they supposed to spend $18.5 million across just a small set of months? Does that not give you more red flags in that situation? And when asked that question, House Speaker Matt Hall was fairly direct in basically saying that he thought that the Republicans who were arguing back for this money perhaps weren't as Republican as they claimed to be.
Yeah, I have about a minute, but let me, 2 things. Do you think the House will vote to restore these, because now they're going to be on record voting on this? And 2, if not, what's the process for this money to be restored in the new year?
So do I think they'll bring this up for a vote? No. House Speaker, I don't even think it'll come up for a vote, personally. You know, House Speaker Matt Hall, shortly after the Senate did that, he put out a statement basically saying, we did a ton of hard work to find waste, fraud, and abuse and make cuts where we saw cuts necessary. Why would we vote to restore that? Follow up to, though, can we get this back in the new year? The House Republicans have even said it's possible, but these people are going to have to come into Lansing, make their case, and then perhaps be subject to a layover period while the legislature decides what to do with those funds.
Because that's different now. There's that new legislation, that 45-day window for more transparency with earmarks.
Yes.
Very interesting to see what happens, and yet if there's a vote on it or not. We'll be following it. Jordyn, thanks so much.
Thanks for having
Jordyn
me.
Hermani, Bridge, Michigan political reporter. More Flashpoint coming up after this. Back here on Flashpoint with the new tournament director of the Rocket Classic, Mark Hollis.
It's great to be with you, Jason.
It always is. This is kind of an exciting time for this tournament, but also, I don't want to say a lot of pressure, but this is a big year for that tournament, correct?
It is a big year, and it's there's a lot to do. It's a new role for me. I've been around the tournament since we started it back in 2019, but now you're getting into More the work I did like on a Carrier Classic game where you're getting into the logistics, the infrastructure, building a city basically in the middle of a field that is now the beautiful Detroit Golf Club.
I'm glad you brought up the Carrier, and because my thought is, and everybody thinks, they remember your Michigan State days where you came up with the Cold War, that idea, playing a basketball game on a Carrier, things where people think, where did this come from? Do you try and take that sort of thinking to this tournament, or are you thinking more of a traditional type of way for this?
So everything we did at Michigan State was a memory creator, and that's what we're looking at here as well, is how can we elevate the event to create great memories for those that are in hospitality areas, those fans that come out and are on the grounds. The fans in the grounds are really the heart of any event. I recall, I don't think I ever missed a Buick Open, and when you go to that, it's, you know, I wasn't sitting in hospitality, yet I had a wonderful time walking the grounds. We're going to create some ways to open up some areas where fans can have an opportunity to see more, participate more, take the kids out, do more, and I think we're going to elevate little touches across the board. The whole team here at Rocket are excited about leaning in a little bit more this year and kind of having a good time with it.
Some of the X factors of previous events, like the big ones at Michigan State you talked about, where they would have those X factors. Sometimes weather, golf tournaments always have the weather to worry about, but the Rocket also has to worry about who you're able to get to come here, and that, of course, attracts fans. How do you go about trying to get the biggest names in the game?
Yeah, we've already started the process. A lot of it is working through agents, and some is the relationships that you've built with the players over the years. We've had a lot of them on the radio show that I do on WJR, and develop relationships that way. But we'll hit the road in January, February, and kind of start the process, and then kind of have a sequence of touch points where we believe the players will be. The date we have, extremely helpful this year. At the end of July, you're 2 weeks from the FedEx Cup playoffs. Guys are going to need points that are kind of either just in or just out, and they're going to want to get off that bubble and pick up some points here in Detroit, so that's going to be favorable. I think it's also favorable for fans. You know, you look at in June, late June, July 4th, you want to go up north, you want to enjoy what this great state has to offer. Late July, you're not quite ready for back to school yet, but you're kind of coming out of that vacation cottage mode, and I think it's going to be an opportunity for more people to show up at the Detroit Golf Club.
Yeah, I think it's one of those things where competing with a lot of different events in June, so that could make a huge
fireworks, Grand Prix. You know, there's so much going on. Now you got that little space, and I think I agree with you. It's going to be an opportunity to space it out a little bit.
Do you have like other ideas? You mentioned like things for fans to get out there, like outside golf ideas, and not to bring up the competition, but Live Golf was in the area last year, and kind of it was a much different type of event. Do you borrow anything from that, or is this you're going your own way? Obviously, two different golf institutions.
Yeah, I asked the guy that I work with, Matt Kaminsky at the PGA Tour, are you ready for me? You know, I think the PGA Tour needs, and Brian Rolfe, who's a new commissioner, was here with the NFL draft when he was with the NFL. He's looking at how do you change the tour in a way that is better for the players and better for the fans. And I think we're going to test some things here. It's just my nature. There's a swimming pool out there. There's some fun things that you could do around each day with a variety of things that maybe not everybody, but some like. It could be a cigar lounge. There could be a casino night. There could be some more music that comes out.
Yeah.
Maybe a fashion show down the 18th fairway. Those are ideas that we're contemplating right now. There's many more. And as I throw these out, your listeners are going to send even more to you, and you're going to share them with me.
Yeah, that's a good one. I hadn't thought about that. Like a fashion show. We're going full Happy Gilmore here now. In your mind, having done a lot of big events, and you mentioned the NFL draft, I know you're heavily involved in that. When you look at a golf tournament, and I was kind of surprised to learn that a lot of golf tournaments, including the Rocket, had an outside company that handled this, and maybe somebody who doesn't have the Detroit knowledge that you and your team have. What's the pressure level like to pull it off, knowing that, like I mentioned, it's the last year of a contract and it's kind of a big year?
When I took the athletic director job at Michigan State, I cited Dan Gilbert's isms. He means that much to me that in 2008, that was there. The pressure on me is to do good for Dan. Dan brought this event to Detroit for the people of Detroit, for the community. It's been a game changer here. I was in sessions with the NFL, with the NCAA, and I will argue that neither one of those are here without the Rocket Classic. It was kind of that bringing big sports events back to Detroit, along with the Detroit Grand Prix and all that Penske and Bud Denker do there. So you take that perspective, and now you're going into a year. We had a challenging year last year. We've gone through the pandemic. We've had tornadoes. We've had all kinds of issues. And we're lining everything up for this to be something special for Dan and special for the community. The community runs this event, from the DGC membership to folks that lean in and all different kinds of vendors. It's a local event, and it's for the community. So it's by the community, for the community, and that's what we're going to execute on behalf of Dan's vision back in 2018.
Yeah, and I know you're still, it's an everyday thing going all the way forward. Still got about half a year though, but have you realized what the biggest challenge is at this point yet, or?
The biggest challenge is making sure the build fits the demand, that you have the right infrastructure and you don't overbuild, you don't underbuild. The volunteers, more than 2,000 will be out there helping, and that comes back to the community. It's working with the DGC, who just redid their course, and it's beautiful. The PGA was out, they looked at it in 2018. They were questioning if a tour event could be out there. They were out there this fall, and they're like, this could be a major. Course for a major. They're that impressed with the changes that have taken place. So I compliment both the leadership and the members at the club to have that kind of change.
That really is huge. And you mentioned a lot of some of the side events that could be out there, part of it. Anything you wanted to make sure fans and people know about, even at this point? I know as we always get closer, there's certain things you throw out on the calendar, but anything right now you want fans to know about? No,
there'll be a lot of announcements that are going to come up. You know how I like to talk, so we'll be making some announcements on players as those start to come in and create some energy. But it's I know how I felt when the Buick went away, and I know the PGA Tour is going through a process of maybe fewer events but bigger events. And as we look at it, there's a lot of partners in this thing, and all the partners need to see value. Part of that value is for the community to show that they love this event by showing up, by watching it on TV, and we're going to do everything we can to give them a great show.
I think everybody's excited. At least we know Tom Izzo will definitely be in the Pro-Am. I mean, he can't get out of it now.
Tom will be in the Pro-Am. I think we'll get Jay Batt. We might even get Pat Fitzgerald over here.
Hey,
so it'll be a lot of fun. Maybe some guys from Ann Arbor. Maybe.
Looking forward to that. Mark, thank you always.
Thank you.
Appreciate the conversation.
Jason.
Mark Hollis, new tournament director of the Rocket Classic, coming next summer. More Flashpoint after this. Welcome back to Flashpoint. Let's say good morning to Gary Miles, editor and publisher of the Detroit News. And come January 1, folks, I think many realize the Detroit Joint Operating Agreement is ending between the News and the Free Press. So before we discuss why it's ending, talk to me about how it began back in 1989.
Yeah, right. In the 80s, when the Detroit News had been family-owned, the Evening News Association, and when it sold to Gannett very quickly after that, Gannett, which owned the News at the time, and the Free Press embarked on talks for a joint operating agreement, which basically meant the newsrooms stay competitive, but that the business operations of the News and Free Press would be combined, the overhead costs to save money, so printing, newsprint, sales, those kinds of things. So that's how it began, and it was a 100-year agreement at the time. It changed in 2005 with a renegotiation to a 20-year agreement, and it's pretty clear that nobody quite envisioned how it would come apart, or that it would ever come apart. But here we are.
Yeah, and were you kind of expecting that at all, or it did serve its purpose? I mean, it kept both papers here in a major city where we look around the country, and that hasn't been the case in a lot of places.
Right. This is really a historic move because never in the history of joint operating agreements, which date back to a law in the 70s, but there was one at least previous, is that never have both papers emerged and been competitive on the scale that we're talking about being again. So it'll be a profound change, and one that I really think wasn't envisioned when it was first adopted.
For sure. Well, you mentioned the competitive newsrooms. I assume obviously that stays the same, but will this change at all how you guys go about delivering your journalism and papers?
Well, there will be changes, but our goal is to make them seamless to the consumer, that you'll still get the news you expect from the Detroit News. You'll still have the outstanding staff that we have. We've been Newspaper of the Year for 3 years in a row from the Michigan Press Association. All that we expect to continue. The back office operations, those will change, and we're hoping and trying to make them more seamless for consumers so that they won't notice a change, except for things like the e-newspaper will look and feel a little bit different. We expect the app to look and feel a little bit different. I think it'll be faster. So you'll notice those kinds of changes. Outside of that, you know, you can expect still the same great journalism the news has been doing for 152 years.
I did want to ask about that because the one thing I've always noticed, and I think viewers or readers will notice, you go to the websites and they look very similar, which might lead them to think, oh, they're working together on some things. Well, that's obviously not true, but so the websites will start to look different.
They will, and yeah, that's one of the things, you know, I think the JOA did create a lot of confusion about, are they the same, are they different? We still get this question all the time. And the newsrooms, of course, have been different, but the front end operations, the customer service, you know, the overhead things have been run, you know, essentially by one company, by the other company. So now we'll have a different set of looks, but hopefully, you know, people won't notice anything else.
Well, yeah, and hopefully, we really want both to stay in business. I'm sure you get the question of, what about the Sunday paper? Is that coming back, or how will that change?
Well, you know, I liken this to a 36-year marriage that no one envisioned ending, and lawyers are still discussing different aspects of this, you know, as recently as yesterday, I know, and it's weathered a lot of storms, but disentangling everything is taking right up to deadlines, which we're all used to. But I think readers are going to be pleasantly surprised with what we're going to offer in January, and I think that'll be an interesting change for folks.
All right, sounds like you still got a surprise or two to unveil there, and I'm sure that's probably the number one question you get. Is there anything else that you're making sure readers know right now as this gets ready to happen?
Well, just that 2026, as you know, is going to be a huge year, and we've got some big issues in Michigan to cover. We've obviously got the election. We've got you know, two big issues: education in Michigan. You know, we're in the top third in disposable income, yet our fourth grade scores are in the bottom 2 or 3. Transparency is a huge issue, I think, you know, as all journalists can attest, but hopefully all viewers and readers can attest to. You know, our legislatures have eviscerated the Freedom of Information Act. All that stuff really needs to be covered. People need to know about it, and we'll be doing that job and continue to do that job in 2026.
We're going to be looking forward to seeing it, too, in the Detroit News. And if you have thoughts, write a letter to the editor. That still exists, and you can always find that. And if you'd like to comment on anything you've watched this Sunday morning, Flashpoint at clickondetroit.com. My thanks to Gary Miles and the rest of our guests this Sunday morning. We'll see you next week on more Flashpoint.